Welcome to part 2 of the Lab7 walkthrough video. So question 6 asks you to identify type inversion from the stove type table of the stove model that has the highest price value. Use an equal subquery to find the correct value, and then format the results in a particular way. So let's start by looking at the part table. I just needed to use fired up to make sure I was talking to the right database. So here are all the parts. If we wanted to order them in descending order by cost, now we see the most expensive parts are at the top and the cheapest parts are at the bottom. So to find the cost of the highest priced item, you can select the top one and just return the cost. And so we should get back a single value. Now we can also write a query that looks like this. Select star from part where cost equal 6.12. So nothing unusual about that. The trick is that since this is returning a single value from a single row, and this is using a single value, I can use this as a subquery in here. And I get back the same results. Now, if I wanted to display, for example, the state and city for all customers in the in the customer table, I can use a query like this, and then select city plus, and then a piece of text like comma space, and then another piece of text like the state province. So this is going to glue those two things together and return them as a single column. I have to give it a name. And then for this particular query, there was no blanks, no extra blanks. So I actually have the formatting I want. If there had been blanks, I could right trim the city to remove blanks afterwards. And I could also L trim state province. Like so. And it looks the same for this particular query, but when you go to do the type inversion in this format, you're going to want to add a space V, and you're going to want to trim off the extra spaces so that there's only one space between those two things. For question 7, show the invoice number, date, and total price for invoices which have been taken by sales associate employees and which have sold to customers whose zip code begins with 9. So here's one condition, sales associate employees. You want to find all of them. And here's another condition, customers whose zip code begins with 9. And then you want to look for invoices, so that's going to be your outer query, that have both of the employees that are in this set and customers that are in that set. And the supplier is in Oregon. So let's start by looking at all the purchase orders, all the PO line items, and all the suppliers. So here are the purchase orders. Here are the PO line items. And here are the suppliers. So first, we'll find the purchase orders where, So first, we'll find the PO line items where quantity is greater than 1. So now let's find all of the suppliers that are in Oregon. So we have a fair number of PO line items coming back and 3 suppliers coming back. So now if we want to find the purchase orders where the quantity was greater than 1 and where the supplier was in Oregon, we can write that as a subquery here. So if we want to find all the purchase orders where the quantity is greater than 1 and the supplier is in Oregon, we want to write the subqueries like this. So where PO number in, and then we want to modify this to return the FK PO number. And where FK supplier number in the PO purchase order table is in this set, which is going to be this query modified to just return the supplier number. So here are all the purchase orders with quantity greater than 1 and supplier in Oregon. And we got some. Now, the question also asks you to find the customers whose zip code begins with 9. So let's look at our supplier table again. Let's look at all the data in the supplier table. And let's say we wanted to select all of the customers where the representative phone number started with the number 5. Well, we could do that by saying rep phone number like 5%. So here are all the suppliers whose rep phone number starts with 5. So question 8 asks to show the customer ID number and name for all customers who've purchased a Fired Now version 1 stove. So the stove and stove type tables have type and version, and customer name and ID number are in customer. So somehow we have to get from here to here. Basically, the way that you get there is via the invoice line item, and that gets you to the invoice, and that gets you to the customer. So the customer ID in the outermost query has to be in the set of FK customer IDs from a query on invoice, and the invoice number in the invoice query has to be in the set of foreign key invoice numbers from inv line item, and then the stove number in line item has to be in the set of serial numbers that are returned when you look for fired now version 1 stoves. So let me do the parts. Select serial number from stove where type is equal to fired now and version equal 1. So that's the serial number for fired now stoves. And then to get to the end line items, we're going to look for select FK invoice number from end line item where the FK stove number is in the set 3, 4, 13, 18, 21, 24, 33, 34, 35, or 36. I think that's all of them. So this gets us the end line items, the invoice numbers of those invoice line items. So, and then to get to the invoices, select FK customer ID from invoice where the FK invoice, where invoice number is in the set 228, 233, 207, 208, 212, 217, 218, 222. Oops, like so. And, oh, this should be N, sorry. So here are all the customer IDs that appeared in invoices that had invoice line items that contained fired now version 1 stoves. And here are the names and customer IDs from the customer table where customer ID is in the set 101, 118, 102, 106, 117, 120, 124, and 130. So this is the answer you're looking for. Now you have to put these things together into a single query using subqueries. So, which stoves were sold to Oregon customers? Display stove type and version of stoves involved in invoices for Oregon customers. Eliminate duplicate values in the result, sort output on type and version. So once again, we're going to look at the ERD. We want to find the stoves that were sold to customers where the state province is Oregon. And to get from here to here, we're going to have to go through invoice line item, invoice, and customer. So it's basically the same query as before, except in the opposite direction. Before we started with a particular type of stove and worked all the way over to customer. Here we're going to start with customers in Oregon and work all the way in the other direction back to stove. So, customers in Oregon. So these are the customers in Oregon, the ID numbers. And then here are the invoices for those customers. And here are the here are the serial numbers from the invoice line items for those invoices. And you'll notice that some of these are null, but that's okay, because in the next one, we're going to select the stove data. And let's start with 2. I could put a null in here, but it won't have any effect because the serial number will never match null. Okay, so that should be all of them, unless I missed one. So these are the stoves you want to return in your query. Create one subquery from all of those. And then eliminate the duplicate values in the results, and you want to output the type inversion of the stoves. So you're going to only select those 2 columns, and then you're going to select the distinct values. Show the repair number and description for every stove repair which either belongs to a customer from California or Washington, or is blue in color. Be careful to use parentheses to apply the correct logic. Note that the primary key of the stove table serial number corresponds to the foreign key, FK stove number, and stove repair. Well, we sort of needed that already for the previous 2 ones, but I suppose it's helpful anyhow. So more complicated expression. Let's look at the part table and see what we can come up with. Oops. Should have just selected that. So they're the parts, and if we want to get to the suppliers, so they're the parts, and here are the purchase orders. And then here are the suppliers. And if we wanted to find the terms and PO number for each purchase, which either belongs to a part that contains, say, widget in the name, or belongs to a supplier in California or Oregon, we could write it like this. So here are the suppliers from California or Oregon. And notice in the query, by the way, be sure it says Washington, WA, not Oregon, so CA and WA. So here are all the suppliers, and I'm going to return the supplier number. So these are the supplier numbers from suppliers in California or Oregon. And then here are the parts where the description is like widget with a wildcard, or description is like wildcard widget. So descriptions that either begin or end with widget, or you could probably just write it this way. So there are the widget parts. And then I want to find the purchase order numbers where it's either a widget part or the supplier is in Oregon or California. So where either the FK supplier number is in the first set, or FK part number is in the second set. And so let's go ahead and copy this as a subquery and tab it over, and then we'll copy this as a subquery and tab that over as well. And now we should have a query. So apparently the purchase order doesn't have a part number because the part number is in the PO line item. So we're not quite there yet. Let's select star from PO line item. And that's the glue that's going to get us from part to purchase order. So here's the part number. And we want to find the PO line items where FK part number is in this set. So here are the PO line items, and then here are the purchase orders from those lines. And now we can look for PO number in here. Okay, so now we should have a query. Getting a little big here, so let me make the window a little bigger. So here's a query that finds all the purchase orders where the supplier was in Oregon or California, or the PO number corresponds to a part that contains widget in the description. So quite a few of those.